What does it mean to be a man in the Middle East today? Well, to answer that, we're joined in the studio by award-winning author Shireen El-Fiqi, who oversaw a study with NGO Promundo and UN Women in which 10,000 men and women in Morocco, Egypt, Lebanon and Palestinian territories were asked that very question. Shireen, thank you for coming in to speak to us.
My pleasure.
Now, it took 2 years to conduct this very unprecedented study. What was the idea behind it?
We have a lot of research and programming and policies around women and girls in the Arab region. But it's one of the paradoxes that men are the pillars of our patriarchies, but we actually know very little about them. And of course, there are quite a lot of stereotypes, quite a lot of misconceptions about Arab men. We wanted to really explore the reality, men's lives at home and at work, as fathers and sons and brothers. And so this study represented, as you say, an unprecedented opportunity to see the real lives of the mainstream of men in these 4 countries.
You speak about patriarchy, and it's something that men seem to be struggling with in the region, and it seems to bring about immense stress. Can you tell us about that?
Well, certainly one of the more surprising findings of the survey was just how much stress these men are experiencing. 90% said they were afraid for their own security. Around 50% were either ashamed or depressed or stressed because they felt they couldn't provide their families with daily necessities. There is a lot of economic pressure on these men. They are defined first and foremost as breadwinners. But of course, we have double-digit unemployment rates in many of the countries. Times are tough. When they can't fulfill this role, they feel under stress, and they are suffering for it.
Now, in some of the countries in this somewhat macho region, there's high demand for paternity leave.
That was very interesting. So amidst all the findings of very conventional attitudes towards the place of women and men, we did find this really surprising interest in fatherhood. 70% of men in our survey had been to prenatal visits with their wives, and up to 80% in some countries said, yes, absolutely, we want paid paternity leave. Now, this is really important. This engaged fatherhood is absolutely critical, because what we also found is that men who were more likely to get their hands dirty in the house, looking after babies, cleaning, cooking, and all that, they were the ones who saw their fathers do this at home. Conversely, the men who were more likely to engage in domestic violence or sexual harassment on the streets, they themselves had seen similar experiences at home. So there is an intergenerational effect. It's really important that fathers are involved because it's the key to changing attitudes and practices more generally.
Beyond this concept, what was your most surprising finding?
There is this impression, to be quite honest, in some circles in the West that Arab men are violent, misogynists. What we found beyond all that were the stories of men who, for example, one Egyptian man who said, you know what, when I was young, I couldn't afford to be educated. When I got married, we had more money. I wanted my wife to study. I put her through university. I hope she gets a higher degree. We met a Palestinian man in this survey who said, you know what, when I got married, I didn't do anything around the house. And then I had 2 daughters, and I began to think, what if they married someone like me? So I started to get engaged, I helped my wife, and I realized how difficult the lives of women are. And so it was really interesting to see this opening. As I said, most men and a lot of women in the survey were also very conservative about gender roles and rights. But there is this minority which is changing. It's just that change, like everything else in the Arab region, is going to take a lot of time.
Now, briefly, Shireen, this is, of course, very much a taboo subject. Did you have any challenges in conducting the survey in the region?
Now, we worked with local research teams in each of the countries, and their surprise, and also for us as well, is just how open men were in talking about very intimate details. For example, 60% of men in Egypt said that they had sexually harassed a woman or girl, and women were also very forthcoming. So we were surprised by the degree of openness. There were certainly questions we couldn't address in detail, particularly those around sexuality, for instance, but those are also questions that are hard to deal with in household surveys. We look at them in other ways in in-depth interviews. So on the whole, it was a very positive experience, and we hope that this study is the foundation stone for other researchers to build upon this work.
What's next for the project?
Interesting you ask. We would like to do this, and we have plans to do this in further countries in the Arab region, starting in, we hope, some Gulf states, but also looking more broadly in Muslim-majority countries to look at the reality of men's lives in this part of the world. And in particular, I'm interested in looking at the intersection between religious interpretations and masculinity. We talk a lot about the impact of Islam on the lives of women and girls. We don't say so much about how it affects the lives of men and boys, and we look forward to exploring that issue moving forward.
I'm afraid that brings us to the end of the interview. Shireen El-Fiqi, thank you for joining us.